All right. So, hi, this is Angie, and we are going to do another Creative Memories blog sketch layout today. And today is from the Shades of Polar Lights collection. We're going to do this one, and here's that. I will link create the link to the Creative Memories blog so you can have the written instructions for this if you're a little bit like me and you like to do like the step-by-step instructions. Sometimes, honestly, I do just like to go by the sketch and just kind of wing it. But this one, there were a couple tips, and I'll walk through them with you. But there were a couple tips in the written instructions that are maybe a little bit different than how they are perceived on the sketch. So we will walk through those. This layout is also in the 101 Scrapbooking Ideas and Sketches book, and that's where I'm getting it from here. But again, if you don't have that, it's available on the blog, and I will link that. And I will switch you over to my desktop view and wait for that to load a second. For some reason, it takes a second for it to like blip. But here we go. I am going to be working with some birthday pictures, and I did grab, I grabbed my noteworthy, what are these ones? These are the Noteworthy Days clear title stickers, because there were a couple happy birthday sentiments in there that I thought maybe I would put in the middle of the layout. So we'll see how that goes if we want to use those. Um, Now, what would have worked perfect with this collection is the newer birthday collection that we have that's more like focused on blues and oranges. But I didn't have that. So I am working with some of these beige birthday pieces, and this was out of the Party Time Blue collection where it was a little bit more focused on just blues and browns and neutrals. So that's where these are. I've got a piece of the cream, I believe it's cream, and a couple of the orange papers. Now, this one for the background is from the Gradient, Orange Gradient Best Hits, and this is still available on the website as well as I believe yellow. But what's great about these, if you haven't noticed, if you have them in your stash, or again, if you haven't bought them yet, the back is kind of just a neutral tonal, while the other side is more of that gradient. So again, if that's what you need for your layout, awesome. But if not, the back side is just kind of a tonal orange. So I'm going to use that. And then I grabbed this other one out of just my stash of orange papers. This came from another tonal um, paper pack previously. I was also looking at maybe this one too. So we'll see. I like this one initially because I think that there's more of a contrast, but I don't know how much of a contrast there'll be with these on top of it. So we'll see. This might work out a little bit better. We'll try it and see which one we like better. So we're gonna set this one aside because this is gonna be my base, and we don't need that right now. So we're gonna set that aside. We'll set this one aside actually for now. What I'm going to focus on doing first is assembling this square piece behind here, this one that has the multicolored papers. We're going to focus on making that first and kind of go from there, especially for me in terms of, again, which colors I want to use after I build that piece. And then really it's just matting my photos and putting it on there. So we're going to start with those squares first. And again, what's a little bit different in terms of how the blog tells you to do this, and the instructions on this image here, this tells you to cut a 4¼ by 4¼ square and then cut it in half diagonally. Whereas the instructions that we're going to do just tells you to cut a square and just put it back there. So you don't even have to cut it in half diagonally. But we're going to keep going. And I am going to do something a little bit tricky because I've got some words here and I want to use this in one of the corners, but I want my words to be so you can read them, right? So if I were to just take this and cut a corner off and then stick it, say in this spot here, I would have to turn it and my words would be sideways. So what I'm going to actually do is take this as a square and cut it in half diagonally, and then I'll have some triangles in the center here. I'm hoping this works, and then my words will be right side up. So basically I'll be cutting the corner out of the letters as they are. So we're going to try that first. We're going to go with that. I'm going to grab my paper trimmer. And for this, I am just going to cut a random size square. Honestly, it doesn't really matter because anything that you don't see is just going to be behind the square. So I'm just going to do three by three, and we'll go from there. Again, this is kind of testing it. We'll see if it works. And I'm going to cut it diagonally. And I am just lining up my points with my cut lines. And then I'm going to cut each of these in diagonal again. So I'm lining up my flat edge on the bottom and lining up just my tip here. And I'm going to do that same thing with this one. And now, let's set this stuff aside and all my other papers. I'll trim this down, but now when I go to make a square, these would be able to line up just as the image shows. Just as the image shows here, and my letters are still going to be legible as I turn this background square. So there we go. There's a little tip for you if you are working with something that's a little bit more directional, or if you are working with words like I am. I'm going to move these aside and kind of keep them the way they need to be. Let's cut this before I cut any more of my triangles and square pieces. This piece, this one that we're matting the triangles or squares onto, is a 4 by 4 inch square, and we need 4 of them. And again, I believe this is cream. This is a more recent color that CN came out with, and instead of being like a thick cardstock, it is more of a paper weight, which I personally really like. If you're into like card making, it wouldn't be for you, but in terms of scrapbooking, I love it because it's not giving as much weight to my pages as I'm layering stuff here. Okay, so there I have my 4 squares. And now we're going to continue with cutting some more of the pieces. And I'm just going to cut some more 1 1/4 inch squares. And this is 1 3/4. Again, I'm going to actually just cut into 1 1/2. It's a little bit bigger. If I have some behind my photo, it's fine. Again, I know that those ones are going to be way bigger than what I need. So we're going to need 4 of these. Again, we're not going to worry about, or at least I'm not. If you are working with more scrap pieces and you really need to get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of utilizing, maybe you only have a couple little squares of what you're working with, you can cut them diagonally, again, to conserve a little bit so you're not tucking it all. All right, so there's that one. I've got this little star. Let's see how wide. Perhaps. All right, and then I've got one more pattern, and this one I actually still have a full sheet of. I obviously have just never felt compelled to use this yet out of all of my party time collection, so I'm just going to cut a strip of that. And for this, again, I could have probably done the same technique with this so that my triangles are going up and down, but honestly, I don't care too much for this pattern, even though it is kind of directional. It's not directional in terms of trees that are upside down, or obviously lettering. Okay, so there we have all of our pieces, and we can start adhering them. Now I want, since I've got 4 pieces of that, I need to make sure that my happy birthdays are spaced out. And then I just kind of want to make sure, similar to this, that my other ones, my other pieces, are not like in the same spots. And I kind of want to keep my ones with the white opposite as much as I can. And then my 2 that are a little bit more brown and darker opposite. Again, that's just me being a little bit finicky. But that ends up with every piece of paper is in like a different square, and kind of keeps it a little bit more randomized looking. You could do this same technique with having the same piece of paper behind there, or maybe just alternating 2. Again, kind of completely up to you. But so far, I think that's looking good. Everything is kind of evenly dispersed, so to speak. So we're going to go ahead and start adhering all those down. And I am using repositional if I find that some are not spaced as evenly as others, then I can quick pull them up and change them around. So I'm leaving about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And let me grab my silicone mat so I can get the corners of this one. Not that you'll see the corners, but just making sure that it's all adhered down. And again, just making sure everything's kind of evenly spaced all the way around. So again, I'm doing about 1/8 of an inch. You can do more or less. Again, depending on what you're working with. You just want to make sure they're all even and all kind of the same. Don't mind the noise in the background. I honestly usually make these videos like at nighttime, like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, after my whole household has gone to bed. And not that you guys notice that, because I don't do these live. I do just kind of pre-record them and post them. But I usually do these videos at nighttime after everyone's gone to bed. And today I'm doing it kind of in the middle of the day because it's what worked with me for a Saturday. But that does mean that I have people awake, people in the house, the dog's awake. Well, I don't know, she could be napping, but okay. Few more. And honestly, making these little squares, and since I was finicky about my words, that is about truly the hardest part of this layout, was just adhering on these little squares. But this layout is going to work great. I frequently have a need for layouts that have 4 square photos. Because usually you can trim, a lot of times you can trim your photos down to a square. So in this case, I have that. Okay, so there is that. Let's see. This is going to be my background. What I need to figure out is what color I'm going to do behind that. And again, I was thinking of this. So let's see if I were to do a square behind that. Let's keep going for a second. I have to remember where I put my photos. Not there. All right, the hair right here. Wow, right in front of me. Let's take my first photo of the cake. And the photos for this one are going to be trimmed down to 3.5 by 3.5. So again, that square size. And a quarter left off each side. Okay, so here's one of them. We'll trim some more in a second. I have brown. I had brown. I had brown that I was going to mat with. Set it aside over here. So I've got some scraps, and then if I need a full sheet, I can. So to mat my photo, my mat is going to be 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. 3 3/4. Let's trim this one down since I have it right here. I think I can get one more out of this piece. Okay. Okay, so my photo's gonna go on top of that. I think that I like this. I think that it will work. Let's see what the other one looks like. Which is this. This has got a little bit more pattern to it. Now I think that there's more contrast between my brown, but I don't like that there's not a lot of contrast with the orange. And honestly, I'm not trying to make the whole layout orange. So I think I might go with the white. Again, even though there's not a huge contrast between this brown and that, I think I might go with it. If I end up cutting it and getting it all placed and not liking it, we can change our minds. But I think I kind of like this one. Again, I'm not trying to make the whole layout like orange. I was just kind of trying to accent the fact that he has carrot cake. He chose carrot cake this time. So for this, we need this to be trimmed down to 5 by 5. And I may not be doing this in order of the blog written instructions. Again, most of the time I just kind of go by the sketch measurements and just kind of go with it. But it was helpful for the instructions just say to cut this square to 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 and adhere it on here again instead of cutting it diagonal. So for me, I think that that's just a little bit easier. Just to have a square there and not worry about cutting it diagonally. Okay, so there's those pieces. So we could ideally start adhering things down. I am not. I'm going to do kind of a complete dry fit of everything and see how I like it. And then we'll adhere everything at the end. Okay, so there is that. Now I just have to do my photos and the rest of my mats. So I don't have any other, this one might work. It is exactly 3 3/4. That's why we save our scraps, my friends. So there I have 3 mats. I don't have another scrap that will be big enough. So we're gonna trim another piece of paper down. And I am just gonna cut the corner here. Come down to 3 3/4. And trim. There. So now I have my 4 mats. I can put my paper trimmer aside, grab my photo trimmer, and trim down the rest of my photos here. And I hate to say it, this is about as much of a smile as I'm going to get out of this kid right now. This is my 15-year-old who is not really into smiling right now. Now, I probably should have cut this photo a little bit, or when I printed it, I should have zoomed out a little bit. I'm going to end up cutting off a little bit of the cake at the bottom. That's all right. 3.5. Kind of looking to make sure I'm trimming him center. He's not completely center on this photo. Okay. And a couple more. This is just silly. Again, that's what I kind of normally get from this teenager. Again, I'm going to chop off his head there, so I'm going to have to cut off a little bit of the cake. Again, could have zoomed out a little bit more on these photos. I did zoom out on this one because it was quite big. I should have zoomed out on the other ones too. I could go back and reprint them, but honestly, I'm probably not gonna. Okay, and one more photo. And again, so this is strange, but this is what I do. I kind of look at where my 3.5 is, and I kind of like line up my hand to see like how much I'm going to be cutting off of his head potentially. Again, could have zoomed out a little bit more on this one. It's fine. And 3.5. All right, so there's my photos. Let's get them all adhered onto my mats. Which again is out of the dark brown, which is also called hot fudge. And for now, I can put those on to my cream and square paper. And I don't know how else to do it but to eyeball it. I'm just trying to make sure I've got even showing of everything. We did not do it in the corners for that. So again, if I change my mind on this paper, I need to take it off. I'm going to set that one on my silicone mat for a second. Okay, let's keep going with matting the photos. And put my adhesive in the center of those. Okay, now I wasn't paying attention. This should actually be this other one. I was just sticking it on one, not thinking, but I do need to keep them in order. So this guy is going to go over here. I'm going to put him down again, my adhesive issue. So this is my first one. Needs to go on this first one. Again, just trying to center. Other mats. This one's going to go down here. Excuse me. And this guy can go up in the upper right. And honestly, as I'm getting these photos on here and taking a peek at them, I do kind of like the white orange piece. And this one is going to go on this one. All right, so now we're just kind of eyeballing where everything's going to go for a second. And I don't mind that. I was thinking that this was going to be too light and not contrast with the brown and cream, but I do think I like that. With my pictures being a little darker and my borders being a little darker, I think they kind of pop. let me for 1 second grab this sheet and see how I like that in comparison. And honestly, I think it's too much orange. I think it's too much orange. So again, I'm not trying to make this completely all orange. I just wanted to bring it a little bit, and that would make too much for me. Again, that's just my personal preference. All right, let's get rid of some of this garbage out of the way. Okay, and so for the most part, I can take these pieces off for now. And for the most part with these pieces, we are just going to want to kind of space them and center them kind of evenly throughout the page. So for the most part, we're going to have the same amount here should be in between and on the other side, and just kind of obviously making sure everything is straight. So I think that's about as good as I can get it. I could probably use like my T-square ruler to try and get them perfectly straight. But for the most part, we're just trying to make them spaced evenly, line up evenly. All right, and now we can put these ones on. And again, we're just going to try and make everything as evenly spaced as possible. So not only am I trying to make my little triangles even all the way around, but I'm trying to just center the dark brown piece on everything. Okay, so let's center this guy. Okay, so for the most part in the layout, it does not show that these like touch, so I could have probably spaced my bigger squares out a little bit more, but it's all right. Now I'm just trying to line them up in general, just because it seems silly if they wouldn't be lined up. Now it looks like my brown square is not quite centered. Okay. This will be the last one. I'm blowing out the candles. And I'm going to have to adjust that photo. But let's line up this last one, or try to line up this last one, and see if any other ones need. Again, I'm trying to kind of line up the tips of my triangles, or my squares here now too. Okay, so this photo needs to be straightened out a little bit. So I'm gonna move it over just a smidge. So I was trying to center it earlier on based on eyeballing it. It might have been just easier to put this piece down and then put my photos on afterwards. So FYI for you. Just so you can center it in this square. Okay, so there is that. Now, I did not get so far as to think of embellishments. There are lots of party time embellishments, but honestly, the colors just don't really go. There's some blue, there's one with brown there. Again, honestly, had I bought I don't know what the newest birthday collection is. Had I bought that, it would have gone pretty well, but I'm thinking I like this. I could do this one too, but I'm thinking I like this, and I might actually see maybe even I would cut out a carrot and like do a shape of a carrot in the center for that. So I don't know. But yeah, so this is the finished layout for this. Um, for that, all I have to do is do a little bit of embellishing. What they did too that I didn't do, which I still probably could, was they drew some little dashes on this one, just some little like stitching dashes, and that's kind of cute. Um, Maybe I'll test that out on this little like scrap paper and see how I like it, because I would probably do it in the brown. That might be a little bit too much. Let's see. If I were to, ooh, I think I kind of like that. I think I do kind of like that, and it would kind of just bring that together. All right, so here we go. We're gonna go for it. I could do this afterwards, but maybe I'll just do one really quick. So I don't want to waste people's time while I'm just drawing some little doodle lines. Again, this is not something that you have to add. Do what your heart desires, but it's a fun little detail that I do like to add every once in a while. Honestly, when I think about it, and sometimes I don't think about it unless I see it, just like in their example. Okay. But in this case, I think it just kind of ties it all in, separates it a little bit, and ties it all into that photo mat. So there we go. There's one. And I do like that. I think it gives a little bit extra. Okay, so I will finish doing my little dashes on the rest of these. I will figure out what I'm going to do for a little happy birthday title in the center. And there we go. So there we go. All right, so brought you back over. So there you go. I hope that inspires you to get a page done. Maybe think a little bit outside of the box with the different squares that we created here. Again, I would have never thought to layer the little squares and kind of shift them. So it's fun, just a little inspiration to do something different and think about things in a different way. I hope that gives you a little bit of crafty inspiration, and until next time, happy scrapping.